Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. There's something about silence that can either bring two hearts closer or let them drift miles apart. For Mia, silence had become a familiar guest in their house, a cold shadow between the walls of their marriage. She could hear it now, louder than ever, as her husband, Ethan, traced his fingers across the rim of the delicate wine glass, his eyes avoiding hers. They used to talk for hours, used to laugh until midnight. But now, words seemed dangerous, too sharp, too real. Mia wasn't sure when the distance had settled in, but she could feel it in the way his touch lingered on objects instead of on her skin. Ethan had always been the steady one, the man who could fix a broken shelf, calm a raging storm, or hold her hand when the world fell apart. But lately, his steadiness felt rehearsed, almost like he was reading from a script written by someone else. She missed him. Or maybe she missed the version of him that once existed. They sat in their beautiful kitchen, the granite countertop between them like an emotional battlefield. Ethan's voice cut through the silence, soft but firm. "Be quiet," he said, but not out of anger. There was something different in his tone, a gentle authority that both unnerved and thrilled her. His fingers slid across the table toward hers, stopping just short of touching her skin, as if asking for permission to bridge the widening gap between them. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. How could he still have this effect on her? How could he still ignite something inside her when trust had started to crumble like sand slipping through her fingers? There was something he wasn't telling her. She could feel it, small, sharp moments where his stories didn't align, where his phone buzzed late at night, and where he turned his back just long enough for questions to grow like weeds. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. But the chasm between needing and knowing had never felt so wide. Tonight, everything was about to change. Mia's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her throat tightening as she whispered, "Ethan, what are you not telling me?" But instead of answering, he pressed his finger gently against her lips, his gaze locking hers in a complex dance of desire, regret, and something she couldn't yet name. "Be quiet," he repeated, his voice thick with meaning. And as his fingers slid into her trembling hand, pulling her closer, Mia realized the truth wasn't just knocking at their door, it had already slipped inside. And maybe, it had been there all along. Mia's hands trembled faintly in Ethan's grasp, but she didn't pull away. Part of her wanted to rip her hands back and demand the truth, but the other part, the softer part, wasn't ready to lose what they still had. Even if it was fragile. Even if it was already slipping. Ethan's silence wrapped around her like a tightening cord. His eyes, once a sanctuary, now looked like a place she could get lost in, and not in the way she used to. There were shadows in them now, edges she hadn't seen before. She searched his face, begging for something, anything, that could steady her. "You used to tell me everything," she whispered, her throat tightening. "You used to need to tell me." His thumb brushed over her knuckles, almost like he was soothing her, but the softness of the gesture only made her ache more. "It's not that simple anymore." Her heart cracked at his words. Not that simple. Love was supposed to be messy, complicated, but never quiet. Never this secretive. Ethan leaned back slightly, just enough for the warmth between them to start slipping away again. "People change, Mia. Sometimes you wake up and you don't even recognize yourself." The weight of his confession sank heavily between them. She remembered the nights he used to pull her into his arms without asking, the spontaneous road trips, the way he used to watch her like she was the most beautiful thing in the room, even when she wasn't trying. But lately, he looked past her, through her, as if something else had caught his attention. Something, or someone. "Is she important to you?" Mia's voice trembled, but her gaze held steady, desperate to know the truth even if it shattered her. Ethan's jaw flexed, his fingers tightening around hers just for a moment before he finally let go. "I didn't say there was anyone else." But he didn't say there wasn't. The air between them thickened with words unsaid and feelings unspoken. Mia's chest burned with a strange mix of hope and dread. She didn't know which side she wanted to win. Ethan stood slowly, his chair scraping softly against the floor. Some things are better left quiet. And then, without another word, he walked away, leaving her alone with the silence that used to be filled with love. Mia couldn't sleep that night. The quiet hum of the city outside their window felt louder than ever, pressing against the thin glass, as if the world itself was trying to creep into their home and unravel what little was left. Ethan hadn't come to bed. She'd heard his footsteps pacing downstairs, heard the soft creak of the back door as he slipped outside. When they first married, she used to find comfort in the steady rhythm of his breathing beside her. Now, the emptiness on his side of the bed gnawed at her, a hollow ache that no soft pillow could fill. In the morning, she found him sitting at the edge of their couch, his phone in his hand, screen turned away from her. The faint trace of a smile flickered across his lips, brief, fragile, almost like it didn't belong to her anymore. "Who were you texting?" she asked, carefully, forcing her voice to stay steady. His thumb hovered over the screen a heartbeat too long before he pressed the lock button and set the phone face down. "Just work." But the small, unconscious glance he shot toward the phone said something else. Something she wasn't supposed to see. Her stomach tightened, but she didn't push. Not yet. Instead, she stepped behind him, her hands resting gently on his shoulders. She could feel the tightness there, the way his muscles stiffened slightly under her touch. He used to lean into her, used to crave the simple contact. Now, he simply tolerated it. "I miss us," she whispered, the ache seeping through every word. Ethan's hand moved to rest over hers, but it felt like a reflex, not a choice. "I know," he said, his voice low, unreadable. "But people drift, Mia. It happens." Drift. Such a small word to describe something that could ruin everything. Later that afternoon, as she folded laundry in their sunlit bedroom, his phone buzzed across the dresser. The name that lit up the screen was unfamiliar, Lena. No last name. No context. Just a message: "Last night was harder than I thought. I can't stop thinking about it." Mia's throat dried, her fingers curling tightly into the soft fabric of his t-shirt. The walls seemed to close in, the sun too bright, the silence too loud. She set the shirt down, carefully, as if the weight of it could shatter her. She didn't know who Lena was. She didn't know what Ethan had done. But she knew, the gap between them wasn't an accident. It was a choice. His choice. And maybe, just maybe, she'd already been replaced in ways she hadn't dared to imagine. But instead of confronting him right away, she let the truth sit, heavy and sour on her tongue. Because sometimes, knowing wasn't the hardest part. It was deciding what to do with the knowing. Mia sat on the edge of their bed that evening, her hands resting on her lap, still and pale. She could hear Ethan moving around downstairs, the familiar clink of glass, the soft shuffle of his footsteps, but now every sound felt distant, like they belonged to another life. A life she wasn't sure she was part of anymore. She kept replaying the message in her head, the softness of it, the kind of intimacy that didn't belong to strangers. "Last night was harder than I thought." Words that didn't just suggest a moment, they carried a moment. A moment she hadn't been part of. When Ethan finally came upstairs, his eyes softened when he saw her, as if some part of him still wanted to reach for her, but maybe didn't know how. "You didn't come to dinner," he said quietly, leaning against the doorframe. "I wasn't hungry." Her voice was flat, but her chest was a storm. Ethan crossed the room and sat beside her, their shoulders just barely touching. For a moment, they sat in silence, surrounded by memories they hadn't spoken about in years. His hand brushed against hers, tentative, like he was asking for permission to still belong to her. "Mia," he exhaled, his voice caught somewhere between guilt and longing. "I don't know how we got here." Her throat tightened as she turned to him, her eyes searching his face for something she wasn't sure she wanted to find. "I know about Lena." Ethan's shoulders stiffened, his eyes flickering away for just a heartbeat before he forced himself to meet her gaze. "It's not what you think." His voice cracked, low, almost desperate. She's someone I talk to. Someone who listens. The weight of that confession crushed her. She listens? Mia's words trembled, a bitter softness to them. I've been right here, Ethan. Every day. Every night. But you chose to let someone else hear you. His hand slid over hers, gripping it tightly now, as if he realized how far she'd slipped away. I didn't mean to. His breath faltered, his forehead pressing against hers, desperate, aching. I missed being wanted. Mia's tears slipped down her cheek, their foreheads still touching, breaths mingling in the tiny space between them. The ache of wanting each other but not knowing how to get back screamed louder than any betrayal. And still, neither of them let go. Ethan's breath trembled against Mia's skin as if the truth was weighing too heavily on him to keep inside any longer. His hands, now gripping hers with a quiet desperation, suddenly loosened. The tension between them seemed to hang in the air, suspended, waiting to collapse under its own weight. I never wanted to hurt you, he whispered, his voice cracking in a way she'd never heard before. But it's more complicated than you think. Her heart pounded. The confession about Lena had been a punch to the ribs, but the way his fingers trembled now told her there was something else, something still hidden behind his carefully chosen words. Before she could ask, his phone buzzed again on the nightstand. They both glanced at it instinctively. This time, it wasn't Lena. It was from Callie. I need to see you. Please don't shut me out like before. Mia's breath caught, her chest tightening so hard it almost knocked the air from her lungs. Callie wasn't just some stranger. Callie was her best friend. Her oldest friend. The one person who had stood beside her through every break, every fight, every fragile piece of this marriage. Her voice came out small, hollow. Callie? Ethan paled, his throat bobbing as he swallowed hard. Mia, it's not what it looks like. But it was. It was what it looked like. Because emotional distance was one thing, but this felt like betrayal with a pulse, betrayal with a face she knew, one that had laughed with her, cried with her, toasted to her anniversaries. How long? She asked, but her voice didn't sound like her own. It was too steady, too sharp. Ethan ran his hands through his hair, his composure slipping. It didn't start like that. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. That's the part that hurts the most. Mia's eyes filled, but her tears refused to fall this time. You didn't even have to love her. You just needed her to be someone who wasn't me. He moved toward her, his arms outstretched as if he could somehow pull her back to the life they were both watching fall apart. I'm still here, Mia. I didn't leave. But parts of you did. She stepped back, her breath trembling. And now I don't know if there's enough left to hold on to. The twist cut deeper than she thought possible. Because it wasn't just about losing Ethan, it was about realizing the cracks had been there all along, hiding in the quiet glances and long silences, waiting to split wide open. And now they had. Mia stood frozen, the sharp weight of the revelation pressing against her ribs. The room, the walls, the years, they all felt like they were collapsing in on her. She'd thought losing Ethan would be the worst thing. But losing Callie, the friend who had seen her through every joy, every heartbreak, tore something deeper. Ethan's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts, rough and unsteady. Mia, I ended it. Months ago. I knew it was a mistake the second it started. Her lips parted, the words caught somewhere between fury and heartbreak. But you didn't tell me. You stayed here, every day, looking me in the eye, touching me, pretending it was just us. I was ashamed, he admitted, stepping closer, his voice trembling under the weight of his guilt. And I thought if I could just be better, I wouldn't have to break you with the truth. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them back, searching his face for anything she could still believe in. You already broke me, Ethan. Not with the truth, but with the silence. The room pulsed between them, both of them caught in the gravity of what could not be undone. But then, another vibration on his phone. A new message. This time, not from Callie. It was from Lena again. I told her. She knows everything. I'm sorry, Ethan. Mia's breath snagged in her throat. The timeline suddenly rearranged itself in her mind. Lena hadn't been the affair. Lena had been the witness. Ethan's face collapsed into his hands, the truth spilling out in pieces. Lena is Callie's sister. She found out. She threatened to tell you. I begged her not to. That's what the messages were about. I wasn't seeing Lena. I was begging her to stay quiet. Mia staggered back, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. It wasn't the lie she thought, but it was still a lie that changed everything. You weren't trying to protect me, she whispered, her voice cracking. You were trying to protect yourself. Ethan stepped forward, his hands reaching out but falling short. I never stopped loving you. Her chest ached, but this time the tears came, hot and fast. Sometimes, she whispered, voice trembling, love isn't enough. And with that, she walked past him, leaving behind the marriage, the betrayal, and the man who hadn't fought for her in time. But what neither of them knew was that Callie was waiting just outside. The cool evening air hit Mia's skin as she stepped outside, her breath shaky, her chest tight with the weight of everything she was leaving behind. She expected Callie to speak first, but for a long moment, they just stared at each other under the pale glow of the porch light, two women standing in the wreckage of something they both helped build and break. Callie's eyes were red, her lips trembling as she finally whispered, I didn't mean for this to happen. Mia swallowed hard, the words scraping her throat. But it did. Callie stepped closer, guilt painted in every slow movement. It wasn't about love. It was about feeling wanted, feeling seen. He was lost, and so was I. Mia's tears clung to her lashes, but she didn't let them fall this time. She wasn't sure which betrayal hurt more, Ethan's or Callie's. But somewhere deep down, she realized the affair wasn't really about them. It was about the quiet spaces they'd all stopped tending. The unchecked distances. The silences that became too comfortable. You could have told me, Mia said softly, her voice no longer sharp but almost tired. I couldn't. Callie's voice broke. I wanted to protect you. But the truth always finds its way. For a long, heavy moment, neither of them spoke. And then Mia surprised them both by stepping forward and wrapping her arms tightly around Callie. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't approval. It was just a silent acknowledgement that the damage had already been done, and carrying hatred would only weigh her down. Somewhere along the way, Mia whispered against her friend's shoulder, we all stopped choosing each other. When they pulled apart, Mia looked back at the house, at the man who still stood inside, now just a memory frozen in the doorway. Love wasn't a guarantee. It wasn't about grand promises. It was about the daily, fragile choice to show up. And sometimes, when that choice breaks too many times, the pieces no longer fit. Mia walked away, not in anger, but in acceptance. As she disappeared down the street, her voice echoed softly in her mind, carrying a quiet truth. Even when love fades, we get to choose what we carry with us, and what we leave behind.